all right. Welcome to another episode of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. What are we on? 21?
21, yeah.
That's a trip because at the same time I've been doing, well, not really right now, but the Critical Social Worker podcast. And, I kept reading all these things about getting to 20 episodes. That actually, I think it was like 90% of podcasts don't make it past episode 3. And then 90% of those podcasts don't make it past episode 20. So if you've made it that far, it means you got something going on. And I remember Critical Social Worker a long time ago. Now that's on like 80 something. So we're like at like 100 total.
Yeah. And the kids this morning, they were asking you, right? You're on episode 30 something? You're like, nah, done about 100 podcasts so far. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, we have a lot to reflect on before we open up this episode. If you're trying to keep up with the creators of Revolutionary Social Work, Alicia and I, we've been on the move for a long time now as we've been building what was a conscious party that's turned into Revolutionary Social Work. We've literally moved multiple times all across, the western outskirts of the United States. We've lived in Utah for a little bit. We've spent most of the time in Hawaii, and we spent several years in all across the state of Alaska as well. And the entire time we have been, trying to build something for, not just with revolutionary social work and all that, but for ourselves and our family and put down roots. As for myself, I've moved pretty much every year of my entire life for the most part and lived in, more houses than the years I've been alive. And so we've been trying to stop that trend for our family and for our children so we can put down some roots somewhere. And so we've been trying to manifest where we wanted to live and a home for us and all of that. And just to make a long story short, the power of manifestation is real. I used to think that kind of stuff was kind of fringe and kind of weird in a way. But everything that I've tried to manifest through intention and putting it out there in the universe, through writing it down and talking about it and believing in it and almost feeling it in advance, every time it has worked. And we want to give you a little insight into how this came about. I don't remember the order that it went down, but I think there's 3 elements to how we manifested this place right here. This house, I know you don't see much, but our new home that we have. I have a manifestation journal that I started a while back, maybe a little more than a year ago or something like that. And I put in an intention that I needed a house or a home. I wrote down the things that I needed in that house or about that house. And I wrote about how I wanted to be in the house and how I wanted to feel with the house. And I wrote all those things down and kind of meditated on it in the morning and said, envision myself in the house and what it would be like and all of that. And the second part of it would be that we did one as a family. We just did it kind of on a whim. We sat down, we have talking circles once in a while. And we decided we were going to do a manifestation journal. And so everybody wrote down things that they wanted to manifest in the house. It was very similar to the one that I did myself. Things like animals close to the sea, land, nature, trees, the ability to host other people so that we can be generous and benevolent in that regard. And I'll let you tell your part of the story, and then I'll come back to finish it off.
Yeah, I think we've been dabbling with manifestation in and out for a few years, and for me, I think it solidified after I read Joe Dispenza's book. And so I did a lot of manifestation based on that, where we're looking at the intentions of what we're manifesting and then, like you said, the emotions behind it and meditating on that over and over and over again, constantly, every day. And so I've been doing that and did one for the house. And like A said, very similar to the one he'd done and the one we did as a family. We have obviously very similar values and things we want out of life. Outdoor space was a big thing. Just comfort for us, but still close to nature is very important. So things like that. And the way that this home came about, there's no other explanation other than manifestation.
Yeah. So the way that I work when we're looking for something like a house or something is I'm very methodical and vigilant about it, and I'll survey everything from like old school sources like newspapers to Craigslist to whatever, and we've come up with some very unique, to Facebook and all that, Zillow, everything. And we've come up with some unique places in the past, out finding things outside of the way, like that one in Paradise was in the newspaper.
Yeah.
And things like that. We've had this incredible beach home in Juneau, Alaska, outside of Juneau, Alaska. Watched humpback whales and orcas all the time. Anyways, long story short, very vigilant about it. And so I'd been scouring, because we'd been planning this move to the Big Island for some time now, several months, scouring everything. And there's some stuff that shows up, but for the most part, in the area that we wanted, near like Waimea on the north side of the island, and with some elevation, everything seemed to be had most kind of what we wanted, or mostly what we wanted, but it was maybe overpriced for what you got, and it felt like, was this really going to be worth it for what it costs? And most of them were no animals, and one of the things that we really wanted is animals. Anyways, long story short, so I looked at tons of these places. Alicia had went and looked at a couple in person because she got here officially before I did, and just kind of underwhelming. And then I'm on the airplane back to Hawaii from the NASW conference in Chicago, and doing some work on my computer. And you know, these days you can use the internet and text and stuff on the plane. And Alicia sends me this ad on Facebook for a house, and it was about from a family that they wanted another family to enjoy the home like they did, that they had to leave. And long story short, it was the only house that I ended up looking at, and really the only house you ended up looking at seriously, I think. And we connected with the family, and literally everything on my manifestation, the list of the things that I needed it to achieve, it has all of it plus, if that makes sense. And another thing I want to reflect here is some people will say, oh, you must be like rolling in the dough. And certainly I have more money than I did it, as I talk about in this episode, than I did as a homeless drug addict, or, you know, as a beginning family MSW student and things like that. But honestly, the universe seems to work in ways that it manifests things within your means. And so the value that we're getting here, for example, versus the value of some of those other places is like astronomically in different realms.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to put that out there. I know manifestation is going to be kind of a whack job or fringe or esoteric for many of the folks watching this or listening to this. But I just wanted to say that it works. And the whole idea that, you know, you perceive your own reality in the universe and it works out for you. For the most part, I can't find any fault in it. And it seems to be a universal truth. So if anybody would ever want to talk about that more, or if I could help you begin your own manifestation journey, I would love to, because I think that's what it's all about, is not just reaping the benefits of that ourselves, but, you know, sowing the seeds and helping plant seeds for other people to grow and prosper as well, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think the important part of manifestation that I've learned anyway is that it's not just sitting there and thinking about it. Like, there's a lot of action that goes into it, right? Like, the intention behind it has to be there. There has to be a very clear picture. And then your meditation is an active process for this. And you're constantly reflecting on it and refining it and doing the work. When things come into, when the seeds are planted, then you have to water them, right? For things to come to fruition. So it's a very active process that I didn't quite understand before we just got deeper into it. But yeah, it's incredible. And I think we'll probably do an episode more on this in the future if people are interested. And we'd love to have audience members to participate, just like we did for this episode.
Yeah, and, you know, in a strange way, it's like this. It's like by using your imagination and imagining that the things have already taken place. In social work, it's like the miracle question almost that you try to get people in, right? So you put yourself into the future and you imagine that this thing that you need, or this whatever it is that we're talking about, has already happened and how it will make you feel. It's almost like using a time traveling machine and traveling into the future, because you actually get to feel those things a little bit. That's the whole point of like the miracle question, right? But it's like traveling in there and setting the seeds in advance, sowing the seed or planting the seeds in advance, if that makes sense, so that you just let the universe know that this is on the radar and needs to happen. And so then the universe, you know, revolutionizes in that way according to what you've manifested in. Anyways, it's something that's always going to be harder to explain than to experience, if that makes sense. Yeah. But let's move on. One of the things we haven't been very good at on our podcast and with Revolutionary Social Work that we kind of want to step it up is just putting out this call to action for community. If you're interested in what we're talking about, if it's resonated with you, if you're feeling the same way, if you are saying, hey, I've been in social work for a while and something just didn't click right for me and I need to talk about it somewhere else. I want to build something new. I want to imagine something different. Then we just want to say welcome to you, and if we can collaborate in any way, please. One of the first places you can go, right, is at revolutionarysocialwork.com. Mm-hmm. You can join the newsletter, which will be put out starting this next Sunday. Every morning, we'll have the newsletter. But we're also looking for folks to collaborate on a variety of things. We have ideas about larger scale things, like a large event called the Waves of Consciousness that we're sowing the seeds for, manifesting right now. We're looking at having a revolutionary social work event here at our home where we invite, you know, some other deep thinkers to come have some reasoning sessions and all of that. We are interested in writing book chapters. We're interested in curating books full of chapters as well. Anything that I'm missing?
I don't think so. No, I think the best place to go right now is the website, because all of these things we're going to be updating through the newsletter, and we have an events page on there, so you can always stay up to date on our live podcast coming up. We're going to have some live talking circles. We're going to have some live yoga workshops. Both of those will be virtual for right now, may become local, more on Big Island of Hawaii if you're here. A lot of things. So the website, revolutionarysocialwork.com, is where it's at.
Yeah, and you can also reach us at revolutionarysocialwork@gmail.com if you want to reach out directly for any kind of collaboration opportunities. And I want to say this, we're busy, Alicia and I, between being a clinical lead therapist, a professor. I'm a PhD student. You're writing a book, doing yoga practice therapy, both of the podcasts, the three kids, homeschooling one of them. We have active lifestyle in Hawaii. So if we don't respond right away, it's not personal. It just means that we want to respond in a meaningful way. And sometimes that takes time, especially when there's a lot of people reaching out, if you know what I'm saying. So don't take it personal and give us a nudge if we haven't responded and you are looking for us too. Well, you want to introduce the episode?
Yeah, so episode 21, special guest, Ace himself. So we wanted to do this for a while. Pretty much, I mean, people that have been watching this for a while, Ace, he's a co-created Revolutionary Social Work and co-hosts this podcast with me. He's a professor at University of Alaska, Fairbanks, professor of social work, father, husband, among many other things, informal mentor to a lot of people. There's a lot, and there's a story behind all of that. And so we wanted to get into that a little bit, talk about addiction. We didn't do a great job of talking about homelessness and that aspect of the story, but we got into some good things. Yeah, how was it for you?
Yeah, really, I think it's always a blessing to have the opportunity to tell our stories, to share our stories. For one, just getting them out, is another way of kind of doing that work, right? And hearing yourself talk about things and think about them, and you learn things about yourself when you tell your story, and it's a release as well. I held those things in for so long when I was ashamed and thought people would judge me. So it's always good in that way, and to tell our stories. Who knows who might be going through something similar or be feeling the same kind of way or struggling with the same kind of things that I struggled with. And if I can provide any strategies or hope or wisdom or any of that or whatever to anybody, even some kinship based on experience, then it's all worth it. But there were a couple things that stood out to me when in reflecting since it went down. And one is that, you never say what you think you're going to say or tell the story that you think. And so it's just one version of many of my story, of that part of the story. And there's way more things that were left out than were included. I think, just that every time you tell something like that or you talk about something, it's going to be different. So that is definitely not the official story. It is one version of it. And I don't think we did a good job at really framing everything, like the timeline. We talked a lot about this and about that and different details and reflecting. But I think it's important to say that I was only, like when it comes to methamphetamines, it was only like a year all in all in total, I think. There may be a little bit longer on the fringe of like casual use. I don't remember exactly. But I think it went pretty quickly, and within the span of 1 year, I went from being a casual use just on a weekend here and there to using every day, to like working my way up in that, the system of the streets and whatnot, and being like a big player and somebody with power and, kind of at the top, to being all the way down to the addiction taking control. And a lot of a woman that I lived with, where I got a lot of my power from, went to jail. There were a lot of things that happened, and I ended up, within that year, homeless on the streets, sleeping on doorsteps and things like that. So it happened all very quickly. And then when you think about my issues with alcohol, have been up and down. There have been some really good times, and then there have been some times where I was not able to, partake in alcohol in a positive way a lot of the time. And that spanned a very long time, you know what I mean? And so I still have to be careful about that. But yeah, that's the timeline. Anything else you wanted to add before we...
Yeah, I think it's just always hard when we're going into some pretty dynamic, complex stories. It's just that, and it's very hard to just put a chronological timeline to it, right? And so, yeah, this is just one version of a story, and there may be more episodes that we talk about this. But I really appreciate from this episode the people that came in the audience and asked the questions, and that was such a valuable part of this episode, and I think you'll all enjoy it. all the questions that came through and your answers to those. So yeah, it was a good one.
Right on. Thanks, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the episode as much as we did executing it.
Peace.
Hey, listen, we got some things that we gotta discuss. How we can affect the system and make it better for us. But first, we gotta start with the man in the mirror. Open your third eye and the vision's gonna be much clearer. We are revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many. Revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many, y'all. This is the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, y'all.
Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. If you're out there in the audience, say hi so we know you can hear us, see us. But today we're doing an episode that we wanted to do for a while now. So I'm going to be hosting and we're switching it up a little bit. I will be interviewing, grilling, whatever you want to call it. Ace here. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm excited to get into it. But how is it for you? Switching positions a little bit. You're usually leading, more hosting.
Yeah, it's always interesting on the other side of it. It's actually more comfortable for me in a lot of ways, having somebody ask me the questions than me coming up with the questions. You know how I am with small talk and things like that. It's really hard for me to pay attention and participate. So sometimes being the one who's doing the interviewing can be a bit awkward for me, and I've had to kind of force my way through it. So it's easier for me to let you handle business and me just respond.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It's going to be a good one. And I'm sure a lot of you know already, but if anyone doesn't know, Ace, he is one of the most incredible humans that I've ever met. I don't tell him that too often. No, he's awesome. And he is family man, professor of social work at University of Alaska Fairbanks, podcaster. So we co-host this podcast, Revolutionary Social Work, and he hosts The Critical Social Worker, a revolutionary storytelling podcast. So he's very busy man. And we're going to be getting into his story. We're going to be talking about addiction, we'll be talking about homelessness, about connection, kinship, coming full circle to family and PhD. So it's going to be a good one. But I was wondering, because we've talked about this off episode a lot, but why for you? Why did you want to do this episode and talk about your story more intentionally than we do in other episodes?
I think there's a lot of different reasons. And one would be, a simple answer would be, I'm teaching the substance abuse course right now over the summer. And, I truly believe that one of the best ways that we can learn are from other people's stories. And oftentimes the stories don't align with some of the myths and some of the ideas that we're taught, in our culture and in education. And so I think just an opportunity to give a voice to what I went through and my experience with it all and how I got through it. There's other reasons. Even you and I, we just had our 10-year anniversary, a whole decade together. And oftentimes I'll be sharing a story just on a whim, right? And you'll say, well, I never knew this. And it just makes me think about how many experiences that I had that kind of get lost along the way because you don't talk about them and you don't share them. So part of it is also, I think, for me, and to, just share some of it. And I think it's important to think about it in the context of, this isn't like going to be the official story. It's going to be a version of it, because you think about things over time and the memories kind of change and the way you remember them and what you remember and what you don't. And there's no way you could ever include it all. So I just want to say this is just one version of many possible narratives, I think, regarding my experience. And there's more reasons, I think, too, but it's a good start.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, even being together a decade, there are times that it comes up. And we met 2015. And so obviously there's a large part of your story so far that happened before we met. And yeah, I think things are going to come up today that I'm not fully aware of or have heard about, but in context, it hasn't quite, found its position. So,
well, I think too, when I met you, I was much closer to that time.
Yeah.
I was very close to it. I mean, I don't know, I guess actually like 10 years or so, maybe. Yeah, 10 years. Anyways, so I was at that point, I didn't talk about these experiences because I was still in that kind of mindset that I was like cursed, and that if anybody found out about it, especially, you know, a female that had feelings for, was attracted to, I thought that you and they would judge me, and that's how that would cloud everything that you thought about me if you knew some of the things. And so I think that was, and we can talk about this later, but I think that was highly reinforced by like therapists that I saw and other professionals and other people that I talked to, and the way that they dealt with me and navigated that issue of me, you know, even just mentioning previous substance abuse problems and how it always became the central narrative, if that makes sense. We can talk about that later, but.
And that, or just before we get started, I think that makes sense why just little parts of stories come in, because I think you definitely shared like little pieces throughout our relationship. But yeah, actually having a sit down is awesome. So, hey, Renee and Tracy. Yep, 10 years together. Thank you. So we'll get into it. Let's start. We'll start just talking about, where did your relationship with drugs, substances, into addiction, where did that begin?
I think if we're honest about it, you know, I was always had affiliations with substances. You know, most people, if not everybody, pretty close to everybody, let's put it that way, in my family drinks alcohol and has for a long time. And there's good and bad that comes with that, for sure. But although I was so heavily exposed to alcohol, I don't think I really had any encounters with other drugs until I was like 15, even like an opportunity, or even like saw it or anything, until I was like 15. And, you know, I went through the same progression as, you know, many people do. I had some drunken nights and stuff as a teenager, and smoked some marijuana out of a soda pop can, and, you know, laughed together, and nothing, you know, I mean, you know, more spontaneous and binge like than anything, you know, related to addiction. And then, you know, it's funny because and we could talk about this too later, but I think that the root of most, if not all, addiction is disconnection, and the way to recover it is through connection. But also the way to drugs is through connection as well. You usually have to be affiliated or connected in some way to get to that, where that door is open for that opportunity for you to even be there. And I think, to be honest with you, the door that took me to drugs, like the first one, I guess, is the problems that you go through, and the weight that you're carrying, and, you know, the holes that we have inside of us and things like that. But then the second thing for me was, I went to a alternative high school, and I have some good friends there, and there's some cool people and whatever, but no doubt about it, it's putting all the troubled kids, the ones with troubles, together. And everybody, you know, people have different connections and this or that. And it, one connection led to another. And I had this friend whose mom had just gotten out of jail. I'm not sure if it was jail or prison, to be honest with you. And we would just hang out they had a trailer outside, and we'd hang out there and like smoke marijuana. And I don't even think we drank at that time. And when his mom came home, they asked us if we wanted, I can't remember even how it went down, but like my friend came and asked me, my mom wants to know if we want to go inside and use meth. That's not obviously what she said, but I didn't know I had no idea what I was getting myself into, or what I was doing, or what it was, or what it would do to me. And I just remember my friend's mom down in the basement, she had a light bulb that she did something to, shook it around, and then she had some crystals that she put in there, lit it with a light bulb, gave all of us, because we were pretty much kids at that point, probably like 17 or something, a straw. And I tried it, and it was like, you know, the best thing ever. You know, we're reading books in the class, autobiographies, and when people talk about like heroin, they talk about a warm hug. It wasn't like that at all. Like, it was more like, you know, all the insecurities and lack of confidence and all of that, it just was like, bam, all came together at once, and felt confident to like say whatever was on my mind, to do whatever without hesitation. And I'm still a pretty reserved person. I'm in a much different way today than back then. But, you know, there were so many things that held me back. And so we often talk about the bad things about drugs, but that would be one of the positives, I would think. Not saying it's sustainable long-term or whatnot, but it's like all these things that were disconnected became connected within me. Would just dabble with it here and there on a weekend or something. Basically, at night, you'd stay up all night long and go home and go about your life. And I was actually doing really well and had the best job I'd ever had at the time. Worked for Citibank. Was very popular there.
Is this after high school or still in high
Just
school?
after high school, yeah. So that went into probably 18 years old, 19 years old. Then there was a time I don't know what happened, but I was disconnected from those people and didn't use meth or anything like that for a couple of years and just smoked a lot of marijuana with some of the friends that you've met a couple of them from back in the day. And I can't remember how it went down, but I started to have more issues in how I felt about myself and family and things like that. And I, at that same, basically this with the same people, with actually it's with that mom, the friend's mom, I was with her sister. I ended up at her house and in the same kind of situation where using like on a Friday night, and then it went into Saturday night, and then Monday came along for work, and it was like, well, I don't want to go to work. And then Tuesday came along, and I think I went to work, and I was like, this is crazy. I got to leave. Because, you think in addition to using the drugs, you're also not sleeping, sometimes not eating. And so you think about if you just don't even use any drugs, but if you don't sleep for 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, on what it does to you. And I think during this time, I had a nice truck and was making money. And so I was a popular guy, because I had resources that other people didn't necessarily have. And I had a friend named Bubba. And I remember that he called me. I don't remember how, because it was like way before the days of iPhones. But somehow he got a hold of me and asked me to come pick him up. And so I went over to this house, and I went in there, and it was like what you would say like a crack house. Like it was nasty. It was, dirty dishes everywhere, clothes everywhere, pipes and paraphernalia and cans and all sorts of stuff everywhere. I was like, Bubba, pardon my language, but Bubba, what the fuck are you doing here, man? Let's go. And we left, and we went up. I think we went up, took my friend's kids up to the dam, to the lake, and swam and had a great time. And, things were pretty much back to normal. And then long story short, and we can talk about some of the in between, but about a year later, I woke up in that very same house that I told Bubba that it was crazy that he was going to be there. And that was when that day I walked to rehab. I decided I was done and walked out.
Do you remember having that exact realization that morning of reflecting on when you said that to Bubba?
I don't remember. I've thought about it so many times since then. I'm not sure if I had that specific connection, but I think I had thought about it and knew where I was at. So I was there for about 3 days or something like that. And, 3 days is a long time in that world too, because you're not sleeping and a lot goes on. But anyways, I just remember I woke up and I had looked around me, so the only time I actually fell asleep, the rest of the time I would have been awake. So when I woke up and I looked around me, and I was like, this ain't me. And like something just clicked in me, and I was like, I'm not doing this. And the lady, this was another friend and his mom. The mom she was like this lady where it had an oxygen mask and smoked meth, not a mask, but oxygen tank, and would smoke meth and weed and cigarettes back to back to back while she had her oxygen and get all her kids' friends high. That's the kind of place it was. But anyway, she asked me, Ace, can you go to the store and get some cigarettes? She gave me $10, which is worth a little bit more back then, I think. I think cigarettes were probably only like $2 or $3. And I started walking, and I went to the store, and it shows you my knowledge on nutrition, but I was thinking, I'm starving, like I'm absolutely starving. And so I went and bought a dozen donuts, and I was like, I'm gonna eat them all. And I started walking, and I ate like 1.5 of them and started to feel ill. So I set them down, and I just walked like 3 miles maybe that's just a guess, but to the hospital, because I had no idea how to check yourself into rehab or something like that. And I just went to the psych ward and asked them, and they were like, oh, no, you got to go down to the other hospital. So then I had to go to the other hospital and checked in over there.
Do you remember what you said?
Not at the first place, no. I remember going into the second place, and I remember you met with, I don't know what his role was, because he wasn't like a therapist or a counselor, but he like handled the intakes. And he was like a boss over there, but his name was Mike, and he was asking me all these questions and wanted to see my arms, because I didn't shoot up. I've never shot up anything or gone that route, and he didn't believe me, and so he should see evidence of that. And basically went through and showed me the filing cabinet with all the people that didn't make it, and told me that, most people don't make it, but I got a good feeling about you. So it's kind of like a warning, but with a hint of hope.
Wow. Thanks. And I think Monica's question, I think it is relevant for now, though, because Monica says, I see drug use presented to children as something that's bad, with limited context provided in order to scare, rather than truly inform. And I think that's a thing that you talk about a lot, right? That drugs aren't always all bad. There was good that you got from it, which kind of kept you in that for a while. Can you just expand on that a little bit more? Because Monica's also asking, how do you plan to, or how have you framed these discussions with younger family members or children or just youth in general?
Yeah, and it's a great question. I don't have the easy answer, because I still struggle with every time I try to talk about it, I feel like the words don't come out right. But I think a good place to start talking with this conversation is growing up in America, and we all have different experiences, different areas, so there's some diversity there. But I think in general, we grow up with this, especially the further back you go, this idea that drugs equal bad, even though most people take drugs in different contexts and yada, 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 and people have been, using stuff forever. Drugs are synonymous with bad, right? And so as an adult who has gone through problems with drugs in society, I'm only really allowed to talk to kids in the sense that drugs equal bad. If I say anything else, then I'm encouraging the drug use, if that makes sense, or I'm encouraging them to try it. So it's a really fine line, but I'm not telling this story here on this podcast for kids, not saying it could never be accessible or anything like that. But I think it's important to be honest. How can we ever get over the myths? And sometimes we're a slave to the things that we think we know and we don't know. Like every time I teach a substance abuse class, multiple people, if not the majority of the people in the class, exclaim to some degree that what they thought was true is not quite there, or it's vastly different, if that makes sense. And I think Dr. Carl Hart, if anybody's interested, look him up. Dr. Carl Hart with a C, Carl with a C, Hart. He's a professor. I think he's the chair at the Department of Neuroscience or somewhere at University of Columbia in one of the departments. Anyways, he's wrote a couple of books, and one of them is Drug Use for Grown-Ups. And I don't think it's a perfect book, but he really gets into some of the stuff about how, for example, let's say a drug does have a beneficial effect, then what right does the government, for example, have to say to somebody that you can't utilize this to benefit your consciousness or benefit you? Some people argue that with psychedelics. Carl Hart talks, I shouldn't use the word crazy, but it sounds crazy to read his book. Did you read that one? No. He goes, he's running department meetings at the University of Columbia in New York and going to them high on heroin, if you want to call it high on heroin, but using heroin first and then documenting it in this thing. And so I've never tried heroin or anything related to that, so I really can't speak on it. But when I used the methamphetamine the first time and beyond, like I said, it was like connections in the brain, like just snapping together, confidence. To be honest with you, it's never left me. And so would I advise people that if you want to find your confidence to go use meth? Obviously not. On the other hand, when I talk about it in past tense, often forever, for years and years, people would talk about the drug use as like the main problem for me. But man, I had problems like through the roof. Like who would go smoke a meth pipe if you didn't have problems already? Right. If that makes sense. Or people that shoot up, like people that are shooting up heroin or something. Why would you do that? You know what I'm saying? Under any other circumstance, it's already because isn't
it more like a symptom of the problem?
Yeah. And when I got off of the drugs, things were a little bit better. And part of it was because, in recovery, there's some self-examination that goes on. So I was able to improve. But essentially, I still had a lot of problems that plagued me for years and years. I believed I was cursed until way after that. It didn't resolve the major issues within me by getting off of drugs. That took other work much further down the road that I wish I would have known then, because that's one of the flaws about most recovery programs and 12-step programs is I think that it's all about, not all, but a big part of it is your clean time, how much clean time you have. And if you slipped up once or did something, then it would go back to zero. But to me, that doesn't make sense. If somebody had done all the work and made a mistake, but they've done all the work and then it just doesn't, it doesn't make sense for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's illogical.
Right. It is. And also, if you paint that picture of someone going into treatment or rehab as you're going to stop using these substances and everything is going to be better, it sets people up for failure, really, because it's just not true. Like you're saying, there's a lot of the substance use is oftentimes the symptom of other things. And so if you don't address any of those things, then what are you left? You're just left with a big hole.
Yeah. Well, so let's say you have an individual that has a hole in their heart, in their soul, and whatever, they have a hole inside of them and they use some drugs and it may not really fill up the hole, but it makes them feel like the hole is full, if that makes sense. Well, that's pretty logical for that person to keep doing that if they've had a hole in their heart and it makes them feel like it's full. Right. Heroin addicts, like I said, describe a warm hug, feeling cold in their belly their whole lives. And then all of a sudden it was warm and they felt good about themselves, like somebody was giving them a warm hug. Well, for somebody that hadn't had many hugs, pretty harsh to tell them, hey, you got to give up that warm hug, or think about somebody that feels powerless, but when they use the drugs, they feel empowered, expecting them to give up the power just because I say so, because it's a rule, because I say that it's bad or something like that. That's not going to make sense to the person, if you know what I mean. It's illogical. In my case, a lack of confidence, a lack of connection and things like that. Now, it didn't heal me from those things, but what it did was, put me in a different mind frame that allowed me to overcome those, at least for short periods of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was actually talking to someone the other day about living with ADHD, especially undiagnosed, unaddressed, unresolved ADHD, and then individuals trying meth and figuring, whoa, why am I feeling more focused and more whatever it may be for the first time in my life? But then everyone telling them, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. So,
Yeah, I'm not a fan of medication for certain things, but the more and more I've learned about ADD and ADHD, the less quick I am to dismiss it from people that I like, Dr. Gabor Mate, anecdotes that I've heard, things like that. And this is what I would say about it is that I feel that, reading self-diagnosis, I feel like I have, without trying to pathologize myself, I have ADD symptoms, tendencies, whatever. And so like on an average day, even today, when I get all this stuff done, I can wake up and I just don't know what to do. Like my mind has got a million things going on in it and all of the, some good, some bad, some things I need to do, all sorts of stuff is going on. And it's very hard for me to get a hold of that and rein it in and grab one of those things and work on it, for example. And so if you imagine, that's my whole mind, like my whole childhood and young adulthood is like well-intentioned, but very scrambled mind, impulsive, things like that. And then using the meth, it like brought all that together like a rock, if that makes sense. And I had the confidence, I had the connection. All those thoughts that were jumbled around seemed to synchronize so that I could concentrate and I could focus and I could know exactly what I wanted to say, what I wanted to do, and do it confidently. Where I think a lot of the lack of confidence, if thoughts are swirling in your head, and I'm not wearing them now, but I have glasses, and I think I always needed glasses, and so everything was blurry to me as well. I just went through life as a blur, and the meth didn't fix my vision, but it probably made it sharper.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, at least temporarily. And it made my mind sharper and it made my confidence sharper and all of those things. And so, of course, I continued to use it. I mean, do you know what I'm saying? Of course, I was excited to go use it on the weekends. And of course, it led to me using it more than I should and then a downfall because, most people aren't able to turn something like that down once it's presented to them.
Yeah.
Because the flip side is if you come down off the meth, you sleep hard and you're going to wake up with like not a alcohol hangover, but a, deficient in nutrients and all kinds of things, and you're going to feel bad about yourself. So naturally, what are you going to want? And what's the logical solution is to go back and do it again.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important to talk about that. And just going to the chat, let's see. So Mitchell, he was saying, did you ever try to go back for your friends? Did you feel like you owed them something or feel like or almost blame them for leading you into substance abuse?
No, I definitely don't blame them because those friends that I talk about in those areas, they had much harder lives and less support. I mean, their mothers were the drug addicts. Their mothers were the drug dealers. So no, I don't blame them at all. And I have a couple stories that I could share in this. When I was in rehab, so I was there, I think for 28 days, but my insurance through my parents ran out in one of those days, like 21 or 22 or something like that. Well, it ran out to stay there. So then I had to go home at night.
Right.
And so on the first day that I was supposed to go home, and I was going to go to my mom's house and my stepdad's house. It was a Friday night, I believe, Friday for the treatment. And you build a lot of camaraderie and, you're building yourself up in there. So I had a lot of people I cared deeply about inside there with me. And it was movie night. So I wanted to stay and watch a movie. Mm-hmm. So instead of going home at 6 or something, I asked if I could stay. And then my mom and stepdad could pick me up later. And so I don't remember exactly what happened, but somehow something got flubbed. And when the movie was over and I went outside, nobody picked me up and the door was locked. And so all of a sudden in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what should I do? And I was like, I'm going to go over to this house that's down the way and I'm going to tell them, how well I'm doing and whatever. And then, but in the back of my mind, what I would have really been going there is for, it's a good excuse, it's basically destiny, right? I got locked out of the place. This house is over here. And I walked halfway over there and another light bulb clicked and I said, nope, I'm not doing it. And I walked back to the hospital and I slept in the ER on a chair. And then the next day I got accused of, obviously because I didn't go home and everything, and everyone accused me of it. And one of the counselors there, he was really kind of harsh with me about it, like saying they didn't believe me. And I'd have to say that it's many people can empathize with, but it's really hard when you make the right choice and people still treat you like you're guilty. And I know like I'd done a lot of guilty shit before then, but like it made me really mad and wanted to leave as well, but I still stuck it out. And then later, not too long after I got out of rehab, I walked everywhere at that point. This dude, one of my friends, was actually the cousin of one of the other friends with the moms that I was talking about, and his name was what was his name? Can't think of his real name, Anthony, I think, or something. But his nickname was Little Lazy. He had a lazy eye, Little Lazy. And he's driving by, and he pulls up. And he's like, Ace, and I can't remember how it went down, but I told him I went to rehab, and he just started laughing at me, and he's like, Ace went to rehab. He's, shut the fuck up, man! You did not. And he's telling me about the car he stole. He was in a stolen car. And he's like, oh, you want to go see Ryan and Dustin of Valencia, the kids of, the mom, the drug dealer that I lived with. And I got in the car I just felt like peer pressured almost. And I got in the car and went over there and I saw them. And I was like, I think I made up something about going to buy a pack of cigarettes or something. I didn't smoke, so I don't know. But something I said, because the store was across the street. And so I went over there and I just like walked as fast as I could and walked to my dad's house. And I was like, this is the last place that I want to be, if you know what I mean. And then I've seen other people around, and I've had other people ask me for help here and there that I used to use with, and pretty much they're all gone now. I don't know. I mean, like a couple, a handful maybe, that I still know of and doing okay or better. And most of them I have no idea. They fell along the way. People have borrowed money from me. People have done all sorts of stuff, and they're gone. So the idea that you usually end up in jails, institutions, or death, or whatever it is that they say in AA, from my perspective, it's totally true.
Yeah. And I think that people don't, well, I think it is talked about a lot, but maybe how hard it is if your connection, your support system, if your family in essence is still involved in that kind of life, in that world. And then you're saying that a lot of substance use happens from lack of connection. But then if you leave rehab and you've lost all of your connections, then what? Puts you in a really hard place.
You pull out the pipe and you reconnect.
Yeah, exactly.
I have so many friends. The first kid that I ever used with his mom, I was living with her sister at the time, but I remember he had went to jail for a good amount of time, like some months, however long it was, 4 or 5, 6 months or something like that. And he got out and he was trying so hard to not use drugs. And the same thing with the other lady's kid. She had another kid that was in prison in Oregon, and he came and got his parole transferred back to Utah. And they both tried so hard, and it's just totally unobtainable. Like in that situation where everybody is using around you, there's no way.
Yeah.
Like if you come, if you've been a user, and I shouldn't say there's no way, but it's pretty close to hopeless. Yeah. And so I can empathize with them. One of the people asked me often about how you did it or whatever. And I did a lot of things, but one thing I did have was support. Like there were so many family members that, maybe they had looked down on me for various things and whatever. But for the most part, especially when I earned a little bit of trust back, everybody supported me. And then I remember I went to rehab on Valentine's Day. So I guess I would have got out in March or something like that. And by the time my birthday rolled around in June, we had a family vacation, like big family. We used to have these big family parties in California and elsewhere. And we'd meet up and rent a house. And like everybody chipped in and gave me money so that I could go. And then would support me and like take in the cars and go find an AA or an NA meeting somewhere in California while they all drank. So it was but it's very supportive, and everybody was totally cool and helpful and made sure I had everything I needed in that way. And so imagine either not having anything or having when you're going to go back, it's the opposite. They may love you, but they're all engrossed in the stuff still, the game of it all.
Yeah, that support was huge. I was going to ask you, like, just imagining if you didn't have your family at that point, where you think you would have gone after you left rehab. Because, you were encouraged to go to places, but then you left. Do you think leaving and, staying kind of strong in your recovery had to do with because you knew you had support from your family? You knew you had somewhere else that you could end up?
Repeat the end of that question.
So there were times where friends from that world of using would pick you up or encourage you to come. And it sounds like each time you stayed pretty strong in your recovery, and you didn't fall back into that world as easily as maybe you could have. I'm just wondering if the fact that you did know you had family support and somewhere else that you could go, even just to lay your head.
I mean, obviously that's a big benefit, but I wouldn't say that that family came into any of those thoughts at the time. I would say that, like, seriously, it's weird to think about now, and I've never described it as such, but that moment when I said that light bulb clicked on me at that crack house, said I was done to myself, I literally think I manifested it. And I said that, and it was like it's weird how things come about, but it was like a non-negotiable thing for me. Like I was, if that makes sense. Like I said, I'm done. And there was no, you think I might have been questioning myself walking away, but I never did once. I never questioned it once. I never questioned it one time. So I think I manifested that myself. And I think that deal that I had made, that bargain that I had made with myself, if you want to call it that, or that commitment, each time that opportunity arose again, there was enough of that in me that was said to me, like, hey man, this is your opportunity to get out. And so that's why I keep walking, like go to the store and keep walking. I'd come up with these, like I said, it's almost like I tricked them to get away from them, because I knew that the power of peer pressure and being around those kind of people and whatnot, what it would do to me, where they were at that time anyways. I just wanted to say before I forget about it, because talking about helping other people that are using. So a part that I left out of that story was somewhere along the way, before I started using, when I was using casually to using every day, that friend's mom had moved, but I went to her house and we were staying up all night. I actually think it was the first time I didn't go back to work. I think it was that same weekend. And there was a girl there and she looked so familiar to me. And I just couldn't figure it out. And then somehow we were talking late in the night and the name came up, Ace. And she said, your name's Ace? Yeah. And it was my dad's girlfriend's daughter that I had spent a lot of time with as a kid. And her mom used to pick us up when I was children and take us to feed ducks. This very kind woman. And I saw her when I was in Utah. I went over to the store and talked to her. And anyways, to make a long story short, there's two key points to that story. Is that one, when I saw her, I felt, because I was a little bit older than her, I felt like big bro, like, hey, I've got to help her and I've got to help her get off. And so I made it like this goal, and I went and took her to see her mom and all sorts of stuff. And then long story short, she didn't come clean. I'm the one that followed in her footsteps by being around there and was using daily with her later on. And then the other side to that is that I have had several encounters with her later on, and she just never got out of the drugs. Well, it only lasted a year or so for me, give or take. For her, it was like 20 plus years, and got in some had a major prison sentence awaiting her for theft, I think. And then she was with somebody using, and they rolled the Jeep, and she broke her neck and is paralyzed, and the dude just left her there. And so we took obviously very divergent paths. And my guess 2 points of that story is, one, that really bad things do happen in that lifestyle. And the other is, often when we try to save somebody else, we're the one that gets lost. We can only really save ourselves and use our story and do it, even as social workers, and help them find their own way. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're never going to be able to save somebody else in such a way, no matter how bad that we want to.
Yeah. And I think everything you've said so far just speaks so much to that, and how you cannot force someone to make that change. Like, it really has to be within you and within them to want to make that commitment themselves. And that's obviously varying levels of that. Okay, going back to the chat. Hey, Ash. Ash says, with all that we've been learning in class about connection in mind, and hearing many stories of concerned folks who did try to reach out to their addicted friends with no success in changing their friends' paths, is there anything that someone who knew you and was concerned about you could have said or done that would have helped during the time you were using so much?
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people that I think had good intentions. And like I said, I had a lot of family that love and care about me. But I don't think that they understood me. And I don't think they knew how to listen, how to ask or to listen about the things that were bothering me. And even I saw a handful of counselors that my mom would ask me to go see for this or that. And it was just all around a shitty experience for me. Like, I felt like they didn't ask me anything that, honestly, I would just play them and then not go back, because I feel like I could say whatever. I don't know. I guess to circle back to the heart of the question is that, in Ash, in the class, we talk about Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate, and how he tells us to ask, instead of asking why the drugs, ask why the pain. Well, it wasn't always drugs that were the problem, obviously, before then. Perhaps they could have asked me, what's so painful? And listened to me instead of, like, I think when I would talk about things too, it's hard for a family to acknowledge that, that somebody that they love and care about feels a certain way or has gone through a certain experience. They don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not that they don't want to hear it, but it's hard to hear it. And so it's minimized or it's changed or you should feel differently. That's not what their intention was. So you should feel differently. But as a kid, you don't understand and it's hard for you to feel differently. And there were things that, I don't know, just to keep it simple without, I hesitate to talk about anyone because, again, everybody's doing the best that they can at the time. But I heard conversations with family members about me and things like that when I was a child. And I don't think that they meant them. But as a kid, you kind of internalize those things. And when I asked about them, it was just denied, for example. And so then, I guess you're left as a kid asking, did I imagine it? Or what you're going to dismiss because the memory's so visceral and vivid. You'd ask, well, did my parents forget it? And I think that the appropriate thing to do, and again, parents are young and it's hard to know what to do. It's hard to know what to do, but would be to, listen to me and acknowledge and like verify, validate that there was stuff going on. I don't think anybody ever really validated the stuff that I was going through and the way that I felt. And not from any necessary ill intention or lack of regard. I just think folks maybe didn't know how to do it, but they should have got to instead of asking why the behavior, what's driving it or what's missing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that also brings me to another question that I wanted to ask you, because like we've talked about before, we have very different experiences. I have not had lived experience with addiction or with anyone in my like immediate family daily life dealing with addiction. So it's just very different experiences. And talking to people I work with now, especially like interns or people working towards licensure, is they don't feel comfortable working with people who are dealing with substance abuse because they haven't dealt with that themselves. And although I work with everybody from, anyone dealing with anything really, also still in the back of my mind, I find myself thinking, would this person be better served from someone who had the lived experience? Like, am I doing them disservice by being their therapist? And I think that's it's a complicated answer, but I just wonder, what do you think about when we're working with people and not have the direct lived experience, but especially when we're talking about addiction, when you were going through it, through therapy, through rehab, would it have made a difference whether that provider, that person that was supporting you, helping, could empathize on that level of having a lived experience versus not?
I think it's very situational. And I think that a therapist or whoever that didn't have experience with substance abuse could very well be helpful to somebody with substance abuse problems. On the other hand, like the guy who was my counselor when I went through rehab the first time, his name was Rick, and he was like just kind of this nerdy guy that wore a sweater, but he had like legendary stories and he had like 20 years sober, clean or whatever. It gave him a lot of, like, I don't know, street credit almost, if that makes sense, that everybody, I mean, like literally everybody, talked about Rick like a legend, even though he was like this goofy guy in a sweater.
I love that the sweater keeps coming up.
Yeah, I remember he always had a green sweater on.
Yeah.
And very much looked like your typical, counselor, especially back from like the 90s. And he would sit on his hands like this and you'd be like, you'd say something and, you'd try to bullshit him and he'd be like, are you full of shit, Chris? But
this is in Utah, yeah?
Yeah, no, there was, so I think that it does. And I think there could be a level of understanding, but you have to also understand or overstand that there's a lot of different kinds of experience with substance abuse.
Yeah.
Somebody may have had a completely different, I don't know that an intravenous heroin addict truly is going to understand me. When I read that autobiography by Aaron Neville, the singer, heroin addict, I don't know that he empathized. I mean, I'm not saying he wouldn't empathize with me, but I don't know that he would understand me.
Right. It's not like you went through addiction. You understand all addiction. No. Not at all. And I think I missed part of my point, actually, when you were saying about if someone had asked you why the pain, what is so painful, right? And that's what we can all do as social workers, that we're doing that all the time. As therapists, we're doing that all the time. And so I think I just try and remind people, and myself, I guess, is if we feel incompetent in some way because we lack a lived experience, you can still go to that question of what is so painful, why the pain, and go from there, and just go from that human connection where you can look at that stuff.
Yeah, and you may not be able to empathize with the drug use, but you ought to be able to empathize with feeling shitty.
Exactly.
For example, that's a pretty common
Yeah.
thing that somebody feels like in a certain time. And I think, when it's actually hard for me even to even put myself there. But the reality is that I walked around, and it's something that I can't even really describe, but I walked around with just a high level of pain on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment, second-to-second basis for like ever since I can mostly remember, if that makes sense. And so, like even somebody, an adult, acknowledging that the pain exists, even if they don't understand it, for example. So I think that it could have been there. I just don't think that anybody ever was able to even get close enough to me to do that, if you know what I mean. Definitely no counselor ever got anywhere in that realm.
I did want to touch on what Alice said in the chat. The Scottish article I read yesterday said something like 60% of drug-related deaths happened within 6 months of leaving inpatient rehab. And so I just wanted to, I know you've talked a little bit, but about what happened after rehab. And a lot of people relapse after rehab. And you talked quite a lot on why you did in that commitment to yourself. But going the years, continuing past that, maybe just share some stories on there.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, put yourself in rehab. I know there's obviously a wide diversity of the way that rehabs go down and the way that they're run and all of that. And mine wasn't like the most like fantastic place in the world either. It was cool, but there was nothing super special about it. But you go there and you go from a really low point where you feel like people don't trust you, and you feel like shit physically, and you feel stuck and all of that. And so if you go 1 month or so, if you say 1 month, and you spend a month in there, and you've slowly been building yourself up, even releasing stuff, because you have to write a lot of stuff and read it out loud, which could be symbolic of letting things go. You should be leaving on a really, really, really high note. And I think I remember, when we were in rehab, somebody, whether it was Rick, the counselor, or whoever, had mentioned that most people don't stay in contact after rehab, and that most fall off and don't make it. At least if you're considering staying sober, clean, abstinent from drugs. And he would say, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
When you're in rehab. So what Rick would say about, we're talking about relapse, when people leave rehab and then there's a high relapse and drug-related deaths.
Oh yeah, so then you're on a high note, and you go home and you think that you're going to be connected with everybody and that everything's going to go well. But half of them drop like flies right when they get out themselves. Like they disappear, go back to using, stop talking to you, whatever happens. And then you go home, and like many people go back to their own, like we were talking about, the environments where people are using the same substance in the area. And then just think about all the disconnection and all the letdowns that you're going to have during that time as everybody else's life, even people that aren't using, like let's say they have their life, they're working, they got the families and jobs, they ain't worried about you, if that makes sense in that regard. And think about all the letdowns that you're going to experience. And then say if you're using that heroin addict that was cold in their belly, and then somehow they were able to fill that up kind of and warm it up in treatment. It may not be sustainable. And then when they get home, for example, they may feel awful cold sleeping on the street, or, whatever, sleeping back at dad's house or grandpa's house where you have traumatic experiences as well.
Yeah.
It's all kinds of things. And so, yeah, you're primed for it. Plus all those, a lot of life's about habits and routines, and, you build healthy habits. Well, you've had a habit of using drugs for a long time. It's not so easy to even just kick the habit of it. And so you're going to need something, that there's going to be a hole there. You're going to have to kind of find a way to fill that up. That's why you see like people quitting cigarettes, chewing nicotine gum nonstop, or suckers or things, because they need something to do. And it's a hard hole to fill. And what about community as well? Yeah. As much problems and drama there is in the drug game, in the drug community, there's also a lot of love, and connection and respect that goes there too. It all just gets tarnished eventually by everything else. But where do you go for that?
Yeah.
When I was walking around, I didn't have family supporting me, and Lil Lazy came and he picked me up and he gave me a hug, and I go and saw the Valencias and they gave me a hug. What would I have been more likely to do? You know what I mean? I think it's just logical.
Yeah, it really is.
And if you talk about deaths specifically, well, think about it. If you used to use at a very high level and you had built up tolerance for something, especially like intravenous drugs and things like that. And then you think you got off of it for 2-3 months, and then you went and did that same dose. Might be causing you an overdose, or it might be causing you something on a whole nother level because you're not used to that at that time.
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that's true. And is this the article Alice talking about? Is that from your class?
She pulled it for a paper that we're writing together.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm just interested. I'd love to read that. Yeah, and so after rehab, and you've said a little bit about, when you have to be 0 days clean, and if there's any use, then you go right back to 0. But after rehab and going for many years, struggles with alcohol have still been there, right? And so how has alcohol impacted your life after rehab?
Yeah, well, like I said, alcohol's always something that's been present. Family, friends, I did an inventory one time, and almost everybody that I knew, friend, family, acquaintance, whatever, almost everybody. And I would say that, during the time of using drugs, when I didn't drink, I wasn't into it at all. And then it was later when, in other circumstances, like as a social worker, to be honest with you, before I went to school for social work, but I used to supervise a juvenile treatment facility in Salt Lake City, and it was great. I loved working with those kids and stuff like that. But like what we did to debrief is, we didn't go sit in a talking circle and talk story. We went to Good Spirits across the street or to my house or wherever, and we binge drank. And during that time period, I was at my uncles, they're twins, they had a birthday party in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And so I took my old best friend Howard, and we drove out there to the birthday party, and we were supposed to meet him at this bar, but it turned out there was a live country music event going on or something, and so they didn't go in, but we thought they were in there. So we went in there and got really drunk. They had like cheap shots or something, and so we got really, really drunk. And there was some guy that kept bothering me, this cowboy guy that kept bothering me. And me and Howard were dressed like we're from the city, but wearing cowboy hats as well, trying to be funny and fit in. And it's hard for me to understand why that guy was bothering me so much. But anyways, we ended up outside, and some places have laws that you can't take the drinks outside, but I guess there in Wyoming, you could take your beer bottle outside. It's a really weird scenario, but when I replay it in my mind, but the guy was just talking shit to me and trying to start something, and he had friends there or whatever. And I was just ignoring it, laughing it off, and I didn't care. And then what made me mad of all the weird things was that this guy asked Howard to hold his glasses so he could fight me. And I was mad that he asked my friend.
Oh.
And so then I asked Howard to hold the bottle that I had, and I punched him a couple times. And then he got back up, and I remember pushed me in the back, and Howard had handed me back the bottle at that point. And I turned around and I hit him with the bottle across the head. I think it knocked him out. I'm actually not really even sure. We left and walked away, and I got arrested. And it was one of those things that your most nightmarish scenario, obviously being in jail with a hangover it was really disgusting, and like a drunk tank basically with other people in there. And I woke up and I was like, okay, they're going to charge me with assault or something like that. It's shitty, but okay, I might be able to deal with that. And I got in there, and what they do is they line you up in a chain gang, like old school, and chain you together with the balls, like in the old Robin Hood cartoon movie, basically. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And they put you in a chain gang, and they walk you down Main Street to the courthouse, and they make you strip down to your lowest layer inside like a white tank top, what people used to call wife beaters. And I had to go with looking just hungover to court in a chain gang. And the judge said he was charging me with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, a felony. And I was like, oh my, it's like shooting somebody. Fortunately, it got reduced to a misdemeanor, and I don't have a felony on my record, or I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now, maybe. But I had that, and then even after that, I went through a bunch of stuff getting over that. I had to do a really short jail stint for 26 days, I think is what I had to do. And then I still had problems with alcohol after and got pulled over. I never got actually charged with a DUI, but got pulled over for one a couple times. And if we're just going by the straight law, I should have gotten one. There were other circumstances around them, but I obviously was not able to get away from it. And if you ask why, well, it's easy to think about, because alcohol served a need for me. This still reserved person who was not great in social situations. Oh, what? Have some drinks and willing to talk to everybody and have fun and laughing and free willing, if that makes sense. It was obvious why I did it. And then I think when we met, I was you know, I'd obviously been in worse places with alcohol, but we still drank a lot often. And, you know, that's what we did when we planned our things around alcohol and bars. We'd have couch surfers from all over the country and we'd take them to the bar and
Mm-hmm.
get hammered. Tito's throwing up on our Spanish friend throwing up everywhere.
Yeah. But it's very normalized.
Yeah. And I think what changed it was us having children. And still, when you were pregnant with Zaid, right? I was having friends and we'd go out while you'd stay home and we'd go out to the bar. And honestly, just what changed is I think that hole that I had inside of myself became filled and I became confident because I had a family home every night, every day for me, no matter what. Like there's never been a time where that's been in doubt. And so it fulfilled a need within me that the alcohol was filling and I no longer needed it anymore. Like I never have truly said, oh, I'm quitting or not, but I haven't done that. It's just been me. It just doesn't really align. I'm not saying like having a drink or having a beer or a glass of wine or something like that is something that never happens. What doesn't happen is me using it to fulfill the need that's already filled right now. I
Yeah.
don't need it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And that's a big part of it, right? It's filling. And you talk about this a lot about the whole, the HOLE, and helping you feel whole, WHOLE. And family did that for you. Didn't solve everything, but it did. It added that level of connection, support, and just knowing that we're always here.
Yeah, it's all I needed. It's amazing how that works.
I know.
It wasn't that complicated. I
It
didn't need to be
wasn't.
pathologized or anything like that. I just needed to feel comfortable and, you know, secure in such a way.
Yeah. Thanks for getting the chat down. Let's look at a little more questions. Jesse said, did you feel isolated in recovery and how did you overcome that or deal with that feeling? What would be a way to maybe address this feeling of not belonging anymore people can feel when they stop using?
Yeah, I think at first I felt isolated. You know, I'm a real kind of like leader of the pack type of person. And when you go to somewhere like rehab, you're not at the top, if that makes sense. And I mean, there were a number of ways I was put in my place, essentially, became that later on. And so it was very isolating in that. I think family was upset with me. I didn't know how to talk to them. Stuff like that. It was isolating. But then after I got out, you know, when kind of those friends I talked about in treatment started kind of dropping off and falling away, but not all of them for a while. Some of them I were friends with and I would walk around everywhere. It was a unique time in recovery because I think it was before this new internet era.
Yeah.
And there were so many things that were going on all the time. Literally, there was some kind of a meeting every hour of the moment if you wanted to go to it. And honestly, I used them for social events. Like I would go, I needed friends. I couldn't, you know, obviously wasn't going to work out for me to hang out with the old friends. So I needed new friends and just became this kind of guy that would walk around everywhere and go to all these meetings. And they had lots of cool stuff. They'd have dances. They would have like camping events. They'd have sports tournaments. They had every Sunday, they had pickup softball. And we ended up creating a softball team and playing together for years, which I made incredible friends. And so I'd say that the number one thing is to like, if you don't have anything to do, then make that something to do, is like connecting and recovery. And I get it. It's probably different now. A lot of stuff's online and other stuff, but find ways to make, that's what I would say is you got to find ways to make connection, connect. If you feel disconnected, walk somewhere where you might be even connected a little bit. And you know, I mentioned you've probably heard me talk about the Madhouse before.
That was what just popped in my mind.
Yeah, I think it's very important because a place like that would be illegal to exist now for various reasons. But when I was using, I would walk by or drive by that place and I would think it was a party house that people were partying in there because there was always people out there and they always had a drink or something, smoking cigarettes.
And it's called the Madhouse.
Yeah, it's called, well, I didn't know that at the time. So anyways, I get in recovery and I see that there's a meeting there literally every hour, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, AA, NA, all kinds of stuff going on, different stuff in different ways. And you go in there and it's just a house and they had all the, like an old, I don't know, like 1930s type of house with like the kitchen wall to the living room tore down and coffee going and some people bring food and a lot of people sitting in there drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, talking about AA and NA. And so you wouldn't be able to, like, place like that, you wouldn't be able to smoke in there.
No.
I think it would have been out of code on all kinds of things, like stuff like that they would have eliminated. But that was the best place in the world, in my opinion. You know, you could sit in there, like I said, get jittered up on coffee. You smoked cigarettes. You could sit in there and smoke cigarettes. And it was just I think that is also a criticism of recovery, is the negative substances like caffeine and nicotine and stuff that find their way in there, and sugar. But on the other hand, you know, like you were asked to be nobody else but yourself and do exactly what you need to know. And if you got a nervous tick, you need to be smoking your cigarettes to be able to talk, which, believe it or not, there's a lot of people like that need to be smoking something to be able to talk. So if you're a social worker or a future social worker and you have somebody like that, don't encourage their smoking cigarettes, for example, but try to accommodate them. And if they're, especially at first, and if they have trouble talking to you, but they say that they smoke, then try to take them outside and let them smoke first or during or the beginning of it or something. That's just my perspective. But the Madhouse was dope. That's what kept me connected with stuff like that and all the people. And people can be shysty in recovery too. You got to remember they're just coming off of drug addiction, but they can also be super friendly and kind and express kinship. And I did all sorts of fun stuff with those people. And I have no idea where most of them are at now, but yeah, stay connected, get connected one way or another. Go there and make yourself known. Offer to make the coffee the next meeting, stuff like that. Find a service or something like that you could contribute.
And that's why I think it's beneficial as social workers or therapists, counselors, whatever we are. If we focus more on helping people find that connection, then organically the other stuff can become a little bit more easier. So if the focus isn't always on like, well, how many drinks you have, are you still having cravings, like all on the substance, and we look more at the level of connection and support and community, I think then we see some more like natural, organic healing that happens for people. But oftentimes we get hung up on the actual substance. And I wanted to go to Alexandria's comment. So thanks for sharing this moment with us. What are a few things you've encountered in social work textbooks about substance use that you feel were not helpful?
That's a good question. I don't know that I've actually read too many actual textbooks for substance abuse. I've taken several classes, but we never used a textbook. We'd use other things, and I don't use a text book in my class. But some of the common things that come up are like the gateway theory, and the way that it's presented. And often it's presented as like somebody uses, say, marijuana, and one day they say, oh, this isn't enough for me, so I'm going to move on to heroin type of thing. But to me, that's completely bullshit. To put it softly, and I apologize if that's ever happened to anybody and I'm dismissing your experience, but I've known a lot of people and none of them did it work in such a way. Perhaps it's a gateway in the sense that, let's say marijuana is illegal and you're using marijuana and you go to a dealer, then it exposes you to somebody who's dealing other things, like in my case, and then you get asked to use it or something like that. But to me, it's a complete myth. I don't like the way that it is often, because I don't want to dismiss again anybody that's teaching it differently, but the way that it's taught. Substance abuse is taught by like starting with the DSM, by starting with how we pathologize them, by how we assess them and things like that, versus teaching students or helping students to think about substance abuse and addiction on their own first, and then looking at some of those so-called tools that we have for assessment or pathologizing and saying, does this align with what I've learned, with the experiences that have been brought to me through myself, my peers, the things I've read about, things like that. And so I think social work sticks to the book. And when it comes to substance abuse, and from my perspective anyway, is you got to read between the lines and step way outside of the book and create something that's relational and help students get to know themselves better, get to know what they think and feel, and the beliefs and the ideas that they think they know about substance abuse, and kind of break those things down and recreate them. And, centering it around disconnection and connection. I think that most social work substance abuse classes are going to, again, teach it from the perspective of pathologizing and diagnosing.
Yep.
And so on. And how do you do that? I took a graduate level substance abuse class at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I really liked the professor. He was a really cool dude who worked substance abuse out in the field. But he had us take a couple assessments at the end of the semester as the test. And everybody got different. And then he's all, well, that's the way that he was lighthearted about it. And he's all, that's what happens every time. And it's just to show you that people perceive things differently. And everyone got an A for it, in a long story short. And the problem with that is like, that's just basically acknowledging that we don't know shit.
Yeah.
And that doesn't do that the assessment's just based on who gives it, how they're feeling at the time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think that, again, there's so much behind it all that the whole questions about how much somebody uses and this and that tells us like the most limited amount of information that could ever be helpful, if that makes sense. It's like the very, very, very tip of the iceberg.
Right. And if anyone's using like the ASAM assessment, which we use in our assessments in my clinic, yeah, that's something that we talk about all the time, is that they're so subjective. I could do an ASAM with one individual, and so another clinician could do it and get a completely different score, answer, perspective on it. And that's what leads a lot of people to get recommended to treatment, or to whatever treatment that they're being recommended for. So it's kind of crazy how much weight it does hold, but how subjective it is. And I think, I know you have something to say, but just before you say it, I think the problem is, within this field, we try and standardize and make things very kind of black and white, more quantitative, because we want to say, okay, they're a ASAM level 3.1, they can go to residential treatment. But what we're showing is that it is really not that simple, and that's okay. But we lean away from it being okay. We still try and fight for, let's make it more scientific and standardized.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows some of the many contradictions that are inherent in social work and substance abuse. And that's, you can very well have learned and reflected about the ASAM, which is a measurement tool, by the way, assessment tool. And you can know that it's flawed and know that the inaccuracies and, that it lacks validity in some ways and very subjective. And yet you could still know all that information as a professional, and maybe even like a PhD, for example. And you still got to adhere to it, because in order to bill, you got to do it. And so, for example, the students in here, you obviously should know about it and know how you feel about it. And that's how we'll close the semester up if you're in my class and wondering about it. But you should think about and reflect on, like, well, what will I do in this situation if it's this tool that I don't believe in? How can I use it effectively to still help people, to help people help themselves and get the help that they need, and things like that?
Yeah. Constant reflection. And I think a natural question from that is, how has your story, your experience, how has that shaped the creation of revolutionary social work? Because, I mean, it's just the baby of your amazing brain and creativity that we've now flourished into what it is today. But yeah, how did that impact revolutionary social work, the values?
Well, I just think that being somebody who, like, when people ask me, why am I a social worker? How did you get into social work? Like, I didn't really choose it, honestly. Like, it's like it, lassoed me in, pulled me in, and I got away from it. When I left my MSW, I said I wasn't going to do this anymore and was going to change it up and went some other routes. And then it pulled me back into education, a place that I fit a little more cleanly, I think. And I'm somebody who's curious, and I've been disappointed multiple times in the field, in the realms of social work, by other people and organizations' lack of curiosity and conformity, I guess you might say, even when it's obvious that there could be better routes or better alternatives, or however you want to say it. So I guess, long story short, I've experienced these contradictions and these letdowns so often over the years, where I'm asking myself, and we all ask ourselves this somewhere along the line about life or about something, is like saying, like, I just don't get it. It just doesn't make sense why this is the way that it is. Why does it have to be this way? Like, again and again, why? And then you think you're going to get, like, when I went to grad school, master's degree, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be the next level where we're going to use, deeper critical thinking skills. And we did in some ways. I'm not dismissing the program or dismissing people's experience in there.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, like, it was still very surface level, like pathologizing crap, in my opinion, and funneling you, like training you, rather than helping you to become the best human and social worker that you could be, and exploring the newer ideas and different ways of thinking. It was more like, this is the way that it is, and check A for therapist and check B for case management. Which one will you do, if that makes sense?
Yeah.
And I just think that over time, those questions kept building up, and I created the podcast and talked to more people. I talked to students. Students are like, I just don't get why this is the way, and this doesn't make sense. And you start being honest, and you start having deeper dialogue, and you realize, for one, how much most people really do value the truth, and how much further we could go by speaking power to the truth instead of what sounds good or conforming or whatever. But I think that the values of revolutionary social work came from being is that most things in social work are going to be like competency based type of stuff. And I don't believe that you can be competent in many of the things. You said cultural competency is the easiest one to pick on, but I don't believe that you could be culturally competent. What does that mean, that you're culturally competent? You're not competent. If you were humble about it, then you would know that you're not. You would realize you need something different than a competency. And I think that's with many of the things. And so you've said this many times before, but it's often times you can find yourself in a circumstance where you don't know what to do. You don't know what's the right choice. It happens all the time for me. What is the right choice to make here? And there's no competency that can make me competent in making the right choice in every unique circumstance. However, there are a value system can do that. And so I looked at it and I said, hey, what social work actually needs is a value system. And I'm not saying I'm perfect on the values that I've created for revolutionary social work. I think I've done a very good job. We've done a very good job. But when you hit that point where you're like, I don't know what to do, but if you look at your values, you can know who you are and
who to be.
If you know who you are, then you know who to be. And as a social worker, I'm a revolutionary social worker. So when it comes to certain things, I've got to check the values and I've got to ask, like, is this nonpartisan? Me participating in this? Am I biased in a certain way? When I'm teaching about stuff in social work, am I doing a good job at not marginalizing, like say indigenous ideas, indigenous practices, African practices, or am I centering them? Am I being relational? I mean, am I valuing kinship? Am I standing up for what I'm for, or am I only talking about what I'm against? Things like that. So I think my experiences in social work made me question everything. And some of it I still don't get, but I've realized that the only way to do something is to do it. And so we're kind of making that path by walking it, with revolutionary social work. And I think that it's unfolded exactly as it was meant to be, if that makes sense. It's never what you expect or initially intend, but the way that it's manifested itself has just been incredible from my perspective.
Yeah. And the connections we've made through revolutionary social work it just proves how important connection is. And Alexandra, we appreciate you being here. I'm glad you did see the LinkedIn post a few hours ago. So I did want to talk about now how you, after going through all of this, how do you maintain your current state of mind and state of well-being? Obviously, it's not perfect, but you have your family, you're secure in that way, but that doesn't solve everything. So how are you still who you are today?
Well, I think I like to use the idea hills and valleys. In my whole life, I go through a series of hills and valleys, ups and downs. When I was younger, I had really big ups and really big downs. And then even when you talk about drug use, I actually think that kind of streamlined it a little bit, especially when things were good. Later on, those hills and those valleys came back. And so I'd ride these big highs where I'd have some achievements and, I was doing things that I never thought possible. And I also have lows where I'd feel terrible and I'd go down through droughts. And I'm still that person. I still have the hills and the valleys, and I still can wake up and feel like that accursed child. But the best part about it is that that's not my reality. So I can wake up and open my eyes and see what's around me and move past it pretty quickly. But I think that, Daniel Mate, when we had that conversation, or I don't know, I guess you were a little bit a part of that conversation a couple years ago. But he talks about in the Myth of Normal about how, like, he came to see things that I think he's talking about cyclothymia.
Yeah.
Which is basically like depression, similar to depression, right?
Similar to bipolar.
Depression. Anyways, he was talking about how he learned those downtimes that he had. Instead of looking at like, hey, this is a weakness, I'm cursed. He was like looking at it, hey, like something in me needs something right now and is feeling this way, and just to honor it and to accept it and to look for ways to, heal it, if that makes sense. And so rather than these deep valleys that I used to get into and feel terrible and whatever, it's only a little bit. And so, and I recognize it and say, well, like, hey, it could be a number of things, right? I might not have eaten right recently. I might not have got enough sleep, or, hey, I just might be tired from all this stuff I've been doing, or, I just need a little bit of a reset and acknowledging it and honoring it. Instead of like trying to fix something that's wrong, maybe healing would be a better word, but there's nothing really to fix. It's just, you can get over your experiences, but to some degree they stay with you, and using them, like using my negative experiences, for example, to empathize with other folks that are around the world feeling the same kind of way. I know I've done it with people that are in the audience in this room before. I think that's what it's about, using it in positive ways, using it to help other people, even the children, using it to help the children.
Yeah. And even in the myth of normal, when you talk about healing, it talks about healing is not a destination that you just get to and then you're there. It's a constant lifelong journey. You're going to die still healing. You don't fully get to some destination there. So it's constant self-reflection and looking at, like you said, what areas do you need a little bit more nurturing at that time, which is why the circle of self, why I created that kind of framework, because it is different elements that you need to check in on. Like you said, with food, are you nourishing yourself enough with the right foods? Are you drinking enough water? Are you drinking too much coffee? Are you
Well, I think
all those things?
it's about, yeah, I have a troubled childhood, right? So somebody individual has a troubled childhood, or myself in the past, which obviously contributed to the way that I was feeling and the way that I behaved. But I was also eating terrible, consuming substances that were not good for me, not exercising, like I said, not nurturing any of the other things that might have helped heal some of that stuff. Do you know what I'm saying? I think that, have you ever read any of the, the 4 agreements, the 5th agreement?
Only parts of the 5th agreement.
With the Don Miguel Ruiz, him and his dad, they argue that we're in this culture, we're just addicted to suffering. And once we could let go of that, and that's true, like the suffering, if you think about all of it, I'm not doing nurturing things. I'm not eating food that's going to nurture my body or fuel my body. I'm eating foods that harm me, that make me suffer. The things, like even when I looked at my past, I would hold on to these things. This is what makes me who I am, This makes me strong. This overcoming these things, but also holding on to it was like holding on to feeling certain ways that didn't reflect my current reality. So why would I want to feel that way anymore?
Yep, completely. Okay, let's check the chat, I think. Thank you, everybody, for all of your awesome questions. Do put any last questions you have in the chat as we get to wrapping up. But what you said reminded me of another thing that I was writing about the other day with love. And so love is an element in the circle of self, the framework I talk about for health, healing, and happiness. And I was just reflecting on the amount that a lack of self-love can lead to things like addiction and substance abuse and other things where you just kind of self-destruct in ways, and a lack of self-love can be for many reasons, but oftentimes it's not addressing those painful times that may have happened as a kid, and hearing certain things in your mind that probably came to you from other people when you were a child, and then you start repeating them themselves. So self-love, how would you say your journey with self-love has been, and where is it at now?
Yeah, and I'd go back to the same thing I was saying before about having the family at home. It's hard to love yourself completely when you have questions, if that makes sense. And so I'd say it's less of the self-love is less of a personal journey, but through that being reinforced through family over and over and over again. I think that it still comes up, I guess some people might call it imposter syndrome or whatever, but who am I to have this or to have this or to do this or whatever.
Yeah. Imposter syndrome is a killer. But where is it today? Where do you feel, so your self-love, you feel like it's so connected to family and just having that love and security?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tied to the values, the way that I live my life and where I put my energy, I think that when I'm feeling low about myself or something like that, there's always something that I can do, especially for helping somebody else, My inbox is always full of students needing some help, or whether it's advice or a question or help with this. There's always people reaching out from the podcast. There's always something else to do, a new idea to develop. And so I think that I express my own self-love by, actually living and adhering and embodying the values that I have, chosen for myself. And that allows me to love myself, right? If you sit down and you write down who you want to be and, all the values it would take to be that person, if you live those and you follow them and you embody them, of course you're going to feel good about yourself. And of course you're going to love yourself more because you're loving the person that you're creating instead of reacting to the person that the world produced.
Yes. That is so true. Thank you for that.
Sometimes we think that we're, like I always said, that, hey, it's just the way that I am. But it's not just the way that I am. You went through a series of experiences throughout your entire life that made you into this person. But you have the opportunity to change the way that you look at it. And, it's not easy. I used to hate that too. And people like, well, just
Stop.
or just change the way you look at it or whatever. It's harder. It's much easier said than done, but it is the reality, the way we're perceiving the world is the way we're feeling and experiencing the world. And you're the only one with the power to really change the perspective, if that makes sense. You may not be able to change everything, but you can change. If you're in a prison cell, you may not be able to change that you're in the prison cell, but you can change what's going on in your mind and in your heart. Fortunately for most of us, we're not that confined that we have the opportunity.
You have so much more power than we think.
Yeah. Get to know yourself. Go spend some time not being captivated by something, or be captivated by nature or something like that, or from our inner voice. And it's hard. I still struggle with it all of the time. But I would say that if one thing has never led me wrong, ever, it is that, that inner consciousness, the voice inside myself, whatever, like it literally has guided me to places that I never thought possible before when I didn't trust it and I trusted the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So Ace, is there anything else on your heart that we didn't cover today that you wanted to share?
No, I didn't really tell any crazy stories or anything like that, but that's all right. That's kind of, in a way.
You can lead us off on a crazy story.
No, there's too many, actually. When I was trying to think of what to tell, I think that living a life like that, I guess one thing that I would say is that beyond even like the drugs and the trauma and all that, one thing you can be addicted to is the lifestyle and the adrenaline and the things that go along with it. Yeah, I wish that I could wish that I had had a camcorder back then to record some of the things that went down, because it's crazier than I can ever put into words. Although it would have been cool to tell the stories another time. We'll find some time on another.
And I am highly encouraging Ace to write a book about his story, which will probably have those crazy stories in it. Because I just think there's so much that we can learn and just get from your experience and your story and the power of it and where you're at today. Like you said, it's not any kind of blueprint of how to get to somewhere, but storytelling is a powerful tool for us to be able to walk our own path and our own journey. So
yeah, I think one of the most powerful things that people, I don't take compliments and all that well still to this day. But one of the things that's been the most meaningful that people have said to me was like, hey, when I saw you, I said, I could do that then. When I saw you and I heard your story and I heard you talking about this, well, I said, well, hey, that sounds like me. I can do that. And I think that that's one of the most rewarding and powerful things that people can say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that kind of compliment you take better. I've noticed that. Okay, let's answer Tracy's question. So Tracy says, personally, I think it's all part of our journey. However, how do we have compassion for our holes, HOLES, recognize and attempt to heal individually and collectively?
Yeah, it's so hard to recognize it. I mean, like grandmother Rita Blumenstein says, most of us are walking around with a big hole in us. And, I think we're filling it by consuming other things, food and media and all kinds of stuff. And I think being able to find that and recognize it on your own is hard. And that's like if we're looking at it from a social worker's perspective, you might say that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to help somebody heal the wound inside themselves, heal the soul wound, heal that hole within them, make themselves more full, reconnected and things like that. But you can't do it for them. And oftentimes you've got to know this, right? Where you're presenting something that's as clear as day to somebody that you're working with, and they just don't see it. And they'll be like, but this, and they'll talk about their spouse or something instead.
Deflect and defend.
Yeah.
We all do it.
So yeah, I don't think that we can do. I think what we can do is present opportunities and tools to get there. And then maybe one time it clicks for them, even if, something in reconnection might be connecting with ancestry, for example. Well, for many people, that's going to sound just weird, that it's going to sound like something they can't do, that's so far outside of the box. But if you kept talking about it and sharing experiences and things like that, you might be providing an opportunity for them, if that makes sense. Another thing I think is being willing to listen to people. Oftentimes, people will find it on their own just by having the opportunity to talk and let things come out of themselves. I always say this, but I've often worked with people that I'm like, these people aren't going to want to talk to me. Back when I was a social work intern and really lacking confidence and whatnot, but I could never be more further from the truth. The hardest of the hardiest of men oftentimes feel like they never had anybody to talk to. And once they have the opportunity, then they will. So if they're able to do that and you ask empathetic, open-ended questions and get them to continue talking, sometimes they'll do that all by themselves right in front of you or right with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I would say, but I don't think you can do it or, take a picture of it and show it to them. They just say they don't see it.
Yeah. That's so true. That defensiveness is just going to come out. But yes, Jesse, we're going to encourage you to write a book. And I love Alice's comment. We should write a box set, Circle of Self plus your story. Get on it.
The Circle of Self with Ace's story.
Could be a 10-part series.
With the story from Professor Ace.
Yeah.
We got to keep them separate. We got to keep these ones separate.
Oh, for sure.
We'll maybe align together.
No, they're coming. We just got to find time to write. All of the projects and ideas. Ace has more projects and ideas he comes up with every single morning. So to try and find time to write in between those.
Yeah, see, if we lived in the old world, I'd just have all you students come and watch my kids. That's the way that they would have did it back in the day. And I can write the book.
Yeah. No, we'll get there. But thank you so much, everybody. Let's just, check if there's anything else. Thank you so much for all of your contributions and questions. Any last words?
I just want to say I appreciate everybody. You know it already, but I appreciate everybody that's here. I appreciate you and just appreciate the life I have and the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for another great episode. We'll get this one produced. It'll be up. We're a little backlogged with some, but we'll get there. So peace, everybody.
You've been listening to the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, and we just want to say thank you for your continued support. You can catch us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share our content with the world. But most of all, never forget to keep being revolutionary. Peace.